So we are live now. So good evening, everyone. I'm Akhila Mohan CG from TellMeYourStory.biz. I welcome you all this evening for a discussion on the book Sita's Kitchen. And I'm privileged to be in the company of the author Raghav Khanna. But before beginning today's session, let me tell you that TellMeYourStory.biz calls for registrations for the writing program season 5 in association with Rupa Publications. To participate in this writing workshop, you must register by 15th February. Now, let me begin with introducing our today's guest and author, Raghav Khanna. Raghav comes from the world of films and television. He is best known as the creative director and writer of the acclaimed food history series Raja Rasoi or Anya Kahaniyan. Hailing from Old Delhi, Raghav has studied English literature. His writings explore themes like the loss of cultural identity, internal conflicts, brown voices in a global community, and man's reckless abuse of nature. Sita's Kitchen is his first book. Welcome, Raghav.
Thank you, Akhila. Pleasure to be here.
So please tell us, how did you decide the name of the book? Is there a story behind the title?
Uh, Actually, the title came about organically. This story I had conceived when I was traveling through Himachal about 4 5 years back now. And while developing the story, the character is completely fictional. And I thought that what would be the name of a girl from that region from Himachal? And Sita was one name which stuck. Then the story was initially titled Salt to Taste, but that I felt somewhere would not resonate with Indian readers. And Sita's kitchen as a phrase, Sita ki rasoi जिसे हिंदी में कहते हैं, it has a long tradition, deep rooted tradition in our folklore, in our mythology, and even in our literature and the places we travel as a part of traveling India. So that's how the name came into existence. My protagonist is called Sita. She's passionate about food, and there is a part in the book which I won't spoil for the future readers, where this title gets justified. How this title gets justified.
Right. Okay. So your book, Raghav, your book is not an utopian dream where a simple village girl from the mountains suddenly moves to London to pursue her passion. It takes into consideration the fact that she is not professionally trained and that she finds both resistance and assistance in an unknown world. Do you think in the conflicts of women there is more resistance than assistance? How complicated is Sita's journey in fighting that resistance?
I will only have a second-hand perspective on this as a bystander or a close observer. But it will not be wrong to say that most women often face a lot of challenges in what they do. These challenges could emerge from their professional sphere, their workplace, either at home. And traditionally, it's been more easier for men to go out and do things. If you look at something as recent as 20 25 years back, or even like 15 years back, it's been like any sort of profession traditionally has been more easier for men to do. That's just the way how our world and society has been. But what personally gives me great hope and reassurance is that those cliches, those archaic beliefs and systems are fast changing. It's something that, at least in my knowledge, has been triggering and reaching a tipping point for the last 10 years, and you can see that gender dynamics are also changing.
Yeah, and the works like yours, contribute a lot in the change. So
Thank you.
yeah. So traditionally, kitchen is a woman's place. However, professionally, it's a male-dominated space. So it reflects in your story too. How do you look at this disparity?
Again, it will not be wrong to say that there has been a wrongly put tradition or a cliche that made that professional kitchens are basically hegemony of men, and that has been true. It's now fast changing. Increasingly, you can see a lot of women in roles of executive chefs, sous chef, etc. A lot of female entrepreneurs are starting their own delivery kitchens. So they are all good endeavors happening. This is something I reflected in my book as well, where it acknowledges that uh, kitchen has been traditionally the domain of men, professional kitchens at least. If you look at some of the older characters in my story, also, they somewhere abide by that notion. So whether it is the butcher or whether it is the manager of the restaurant, they come from a school of thought, knowingly or unknowingly, that men call the shots. However, if you look at Sita or if you look at Gabby in this story, they exemplify the modern day female chef. And not only chef, they exemplify the modern woman in many manners. And they couldn't be more poles apart. One grew up in Italy, possibly had access to good education, uh, has been around in a global city for a while. The other comes from rural India. It's her first time outside her comfort zone. Forget stepping out of the country, it's her first time going to a big city. But what they have is they are passionate and they are, uh, for the lack of a better word, the internet cliche, they are boss ladies. They don't take no for an answer. They take up a challenge and they win it.
Interesting. So, my next question is, what's your exposure to the feminine world and feminine thinking that supported you in conceptualizing the half story from a woman's perspective?
Well, personally, that was one of the challenges, and one of the most exciting part about writing this story is to write it from a female perspective, because you have to displace your own natural thinking. You have to step away from your own prejudice or your bias, and what emerges as an instinct has to be diluted, and you have to live that character. You have to be empathetic to things that are happening around you. You have to borrow and learn from all the people, all the women, and all the experiences you've had in your life, to get into her shoes and think like her. And that has been greatly challenging. I grew up in an environment where I had four overtly affectionate aunts. They showered me with a lot of love. My buas and my mother, grandmother, sister, they've all been very close to me. Now I have a daughter, so I've always found myself in company of affectionate and caring women who've literally been related to me, or like that. And I think that somewhere played some role in me shaping small like that.
That's beautiful. So, now tell us, how different is writing a fiction story from a non-fiction show on food? It will be really nice if you could tell us in terms of creativity, research, and target audience.
Well, let me start with what is common in writing, and whether you're writing for screen or whether you're writing traditionally, as in, like, in terms of prose, in a novel format or a short story. You have to tell a good story, you have to tell a compelling story. It has to be authentic and it has to carry your voice. When you write for nonfiction, what happens is that you just have dots which you have to connect. You have to rely on research, you have to rely on previously existing material and new findings which you can validate, and everything gets proofread. There are creative liberties, but those are of different nature. You can't alter facts and say it is creative liberty. That is blasphemous when you're writing nonfiction. If there is a folklore, if there is a belief, if there is a contested fact, say it as such, that people believe it is said. And if there is fact deeply rooted, which could be universal truth or is backed by scholarly writings, then it can be stated as fact. These are the broad differences. Uh, what also happens is when you're writing nonfiction, you start from point zero, you have to reach point 100, because as a creator, as a writer, you go on a journey which is of learning, self discovery, New facts emerge when you're writing about your subject. uh, you have to be very mindful of when to narrow down and focus in what you're writing, and when to widen your scope and assimilate as much information as possible, so that it becomes the fodder with which you write. I do have a process with which I write nonfiction as well, and I'll be happy to talk about that at length. But on the contrary, when you're writing fiction, or even when you're trying to represent it on screen, you start from 100, you start from everything already there in your head, and you have to preserve it. Your writing is to preserve the best version of your imagination and add to it. What happens is, the moment you start executing, and since I am a filmmaker, your first stage of execution is when you're writing it. Your second stage of execution is when you're filming it, and your third stage of execution is when you're editing it. There is always a risk of losing your vision, and that is something that, as a creator, as a writer, as a filmmaker, you must preserve when you're working with fiction material. Because when you write so when you write a script, particularly for television or film, uh, for a director, the biggest challenge is to realize that script and add to it. There is content and there's form. So what a director, she or he, can add to it, or and at least materialize, is very important. I hope I was clear in this answer.
Yeah.
Excuse me.
And you were telling about the writing process that is involved in writing a non-fiction work. So please tell us something about it.
So, broadly, if I'm researching and writing nonfiction, then what I do is I have a big white wall, which could be either a physical wall or a virtual wall on my computer, dedicated to fact finding, and then trying to establish which are the beats, as we call them, the story beats, the subplots, plot points, around which you'll weave the story. And once you've gathered enough facts, there is a linear and a chronological manner in which you must distill them, and then take that sequential data, if you may call it, and then try to weave something out of it where creativity emerges. And I absolutely love the way you can express yourself in writing nonfiction, because you're not fabricating characters, you're not creating situations, instances, which you do in fiction, and it has its own charm. Something I genuinely fell in love with while writing this novel. But particularly while writing nonfiction, something could be a piece of information, fact, or data. It's your writing and your expression that makes it engaging. जैसे हिंदी में कहते हैं कि रस डालना उसमें.
Hmm.
So that is the art, that is the craft that you have to master, and you have to keep doing it again and again.
So practice is the key.
Yeah.
So Raghav, you come from the world of films and television where you have donned many hats, be it of a writer, a director, producer, or a studio executive. So how do you manage to strike a balance between all the roles? What is your usual routine, writing routine like?
I would like to be one more disciplined with my writing, because one thing I've realized is the most essential part about writing is having a routine and being disciplined of almost writing every day. Take it like exercise. If you do it 3 to 5 times a week, that's all you need. And there are good days, there are bad days, but as long as you keep on doing it, that's what matters. Yes, in my career, particularly in television and in nonfiction, I've been working as a writer, director, producer, and you have to manage it and balance it, because in some ways they are interlinked as well. The genesis of any creation for television or film also begins on paper. So that's where the writing part emerges. Uh, Most of the time, what happens is, when you're doing something which is slightly commercial in nature, or slightly expansive in the sense that it requires you to shoot in a lot of places in like it multiple over a multiple schedule, and with multiple number of people, you have to hire people to do that on your behalf while a singular vision is maintained. And producers part is just about the business and logistics of it. So that's something that I also really love doing. It allows you to have greater flexibility and control over your product.
Okay. So, is there any next book in the making, or is there any particular theme or genre you are planning to write your next book on?
That is very interesting because there is a story which has been consuming me for the last 3 to 4 months, and I've been writing in an ad hoc, arbitrary manner, not formally structuring this. That is how I begin. Write a scene if it you're able to visualize it somewhere, like while on a jog, where you're in your bed, you're not able to sleep, and you just come back to your laptop and write that scene. You write your characters, you write the setting, and try to find what their lives are going to go through. So I am working on a story. It's going to be slightly different than Sita's Kitchen. It's going to have more layers. It's not contemporary. It's set 100 years ago. Begins in the 1920s. It's not around food. Still
Okay.
has a female protagonist. And Sita's Kitchen, I believe, is more coming of age, and you get a very happy and comforting vibe when you read it. That's what I've been told, at least.
Yeah, that's true.
But this one is more dramatic and has an angle or an element of tragedy in it as well. Yeah.
So, what kind of books or genres do you like to read? And what are some of your favorite titles, or say titles which have immensely helped you in your writing journey?
So I studied literature, and that allowed me to read a lot of classics at a very early age. If I have to be completely honest, like half of those I read the abridged versions and just got through. But there have been novels, there have been stories and writers particularly whose work had such a profound impact on me that not only would I read what was a part of my syllabus, I'll also go out of my way to read their other works as well. Chinua Achebe is one such writer. Things Fall Apart, I believe, is a masterful work. Then the works of Mirza Ghalib, and not Mirza Ghalib as he's popularly known, like आजकल तो उनको बेचारों को he's been reduced to just SMS shairi. But the real legacy and heritage of Mirza Ghalib lies in his depiction of Delhi at the cusp of the twilight of the Mughal Empire and the brute force of the British Raj, the 1857 rebellion which emerged. And Mirza Ghalib was a part of these group of poets, scholars, and thinkers who probably had a very shooting star like moment of Delhi Renaissance, where poetically, linguistically, artistically, Delhi was at its peak during their lifetimes. Unfortunately, that didn't live on, but the remnants and the glory and the lingering effect of it is still something that Old Delhi is known for.
So, Raghav, now tell us that how was your publishing journey with the Rupa publications? How the editorial experience was, and what value did such intervention add to your work?
So I must start this by thanking Kapish and thanking Dibakar for providing extreme amount of support to me. Uh, Even though I've written for television previously, I'm still a debut author, and I came with that presumption that debut authors don't get like chances very easily. So Rupa is somebody who placed their faith in my work. They thought that this is something that they can back, and I've really enjoyed and I really appreciate the way they value added to the text, where at first stage it was just my manuscript, and there was one round of editorial feedback which was not major but still significant. After that, the multiple rounds of proofreading that they were able to provide, Uh, it was exceptional for me. I could see in each round the value addition that the work was acquiring. And I was also able to, upon so much of rereading and getting second perspective, be in a self-critical mode in a positive manner where I could basically reduce some parts of the novel. Just give me a moment, I have to do this. Yeah. So I was in a self-critical manner, but in a very positive way. It only benefited the text from there. Then yeah, I mean it's Rupa for any young and debut author. I'd say let Rupa be your first port of call because they really really value talent. They value once they take you under their wings, they really do their best to take your book out there, be it in store promotion, online promotion, and visibility. I think it's the best you can get as a debut author.
That's really nice to hear. And in today's age, when the consumption of stories is happening through so many different media formats, OTT being the most sought out, do you think the reading of books has deteriorated as a practice? Please also add your own reading preferences while answering this.
I don't think reading should feel scared of any particular media. Films have been around for almost 150 years now.
Hmm.
Reading and writing far predate that. It goes beyond 2000 years of human existence. Uh, so and it's not that when films emerged or when theatrical films had their heyday or TV was invented that reading went down. I mean, statistically, yes, you can point at a certain graph and say that readership went up and down, fluctuated, but in essence what remains is that readers, the kind of joy and comfort they get from reading a book, that is unparalleled. Books also become basis of many classical uh, projects that are in the film and TV world. Uh, I think what is important for basically readers, for publishers, writers, collectively as a community and an industry is to ensure that children are introduced to reading at an early age because that's where they have a lot of options. That's where they can easily start streaming something on their mobile phone and continue streaming when they get home. And picking up a book may just not be one of their priorities in case mobile just distracts them insufficiently. But I believe ebooks are also there to counter that. So I think it all boils down to parents. As long as parents are inculcating reading habits in children, and I myself have a 4-year-old daughter, and we make sure that she reads every day, even if it is a page that she reads every day, uh, and that reading is not going to go anywhere. I certainly believe that. I
Right.
personally have had phases where I have not read for weeks and months at a stretch,
Hmm.
but it always comes back.
Right.
And that right now I'm in the middle of reading 3 books at one point, and I
Oh,
wish I was not doing that and I was just going through one.
okay.
But while my reading speed has slowed down from my earlier days, but it's still there. The habit is still there.
Actually, both the mediums have their own, set of experiences, and
Oh,
we
absolutely. You,
can
you
go
can't compare. They have coexisted and they'll continue to coexist.
like this. That's right.
Yeah.
So, Raghav, it was lovely talking to you, and thank you for the very insightful conversation and for your time this evening. And friends, I just wanted to show you the book Sita's Kitchen. I couldn't at the beginning, so it's a lovely read.
Yeah.
Please check it out.
I've got the
And
hard copy with me here in case
yeah,
anybody wants to see the
yeah,
hard copy that's here.
it's beautiful. The cover is so beautiful.
Thank you.
So, yeah. So, I would like to remind that tellmeyourstory.biz calls for registrations for the writing program season 5 in association with Rupa Publications. To participate in this writing workshop, you must register by 15th February. So, write, read, share, discuss. Till then, stay well, stay safe, stay together, though distanced. Good night.
Thank you.